Look at downtown Chicago from above, and you see a masterclass in modern architecture. But if you drop your gaze down to the ground level, right at the city's most prized address, you'll find a massive, muddy blemish. This patch of dirt was supposed to be the crown jewel of the skyline. The plan was for the Chicago Spire, a 2,000-foot drill bit-shaped megastructure that would have claimed the title of the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere. But right after ground was broken, the 2008 financial crash hit. Funding evaporated overnight, turning a $500 million gamble into a total failure. What the developers left behind was a 110-foot deep, 75-foot wide crater. For nearly 2 decades, it sat empty, slowly filling with groundwater behind a chain-link fence. To understand why this huge hole exists, we have to look past the modern real estate deal. If you dig into the history of this exact location, you find ground zero for a 200-year cycle of ruthless ambition. Jump back to 1790, before the skyscrapers, before the trains. A fur trader named Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable arrived at this bend in the shoreline to set up the area's first trading post. He chose this spot for a very practical reason. The exact point where the Chicago River meets Lake Michigan was the ultimate natural choke point. It served as the vital link connecting canoe-based trade routes all across the vast interior plains. That geographic advantage made the land incredibly valuable, and the competition to control it was violent. The estate was bought from Du Sable by a trader named Jean Lalime. The peace didn't last long. A rival silversmith, John Kinzie, wanted a monopoly on the local fur trade, which culminated in Kinzie stabbing Lalime to death and taking over. From its very first settler, the city's presence on this patch of dirt was defined by fierce competition for economic control. By the mid-1800s, the waterfront industrialized. The opening of the Erie Canal and the arrival of railroads transformed the shoreline into a massive shipping hub. Developers built massive infrastructure to handle the cargo, culminating in the Pew Terminal right on this footprint. It was a 7-story warehouse containing 23 acres of floor space under a single roof. The terminal's design was purely functional. It was positioned so raw materials pulling in from the prairie lands on elevated trains could be discharged directly into the building, straight onto steamships waiting in the lake, without a single interruption. But this high-volume utility came with severe pollution. While freight trains rumbled through downtown, the city's newly wealthy elite were pouring money into pristine classical architecture for events like the World's Columbian Exposition. They were increasingly embarrassed by the gritty reality of their own front yard. To fix this, architects Daniel Burnham and Edward Bennett drafted the Plan of Chicago. They proposed reorganizing the Taiague rail yards entirely and reclaiming the lakefront for public parks and boulevards. This clash between working-class industrial utility and high society aesthetics created a century-long tug-of-war over what the lakefront was actually for. By the mid-20th century, shifting logistics had emptied the shoreline. Long-haul trucking and a new deep-water port 20 miles south redirected the flow of goods, leaving the inner-city warehouses to decay. Seeing an opportunity in the decline, developers took a massive gamble in 1965. Right in the middle of these decaying industrial road ramps, they broke ground on Lake Point Tower. During construction, engineers used the tower as a giant testing station. They mounted seismographs to the top to see how its 3 curved Y-shaped wings would respond to the brutal winds coming off Lake Michigan. The data they gathered proved the aerodynamic strength of the design. Decades later, that precise structural principle served as the direct inspiration for the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, the current tallest building in the world. Back in Chicago, Lake Point Tower became a cultural magnet. It attracted celebrities like Tom Cruise and Dolly Parton, shifting the public's perception of the district from a gritty shipping hub to a luxury enclave. By proving the lakefront could be a high-status destination, Lake Point Tower paved the way for the district's modern identity as the city's most expensive real estate. In the new millennium, the area was fully gentrified, and developers were ready to flex. Reclaiming the title of World's Tallest became the ultimate goal for Chicago's most coveted address. Breaking ground on the Spire in 2007 continued the site's history of high-stakes expansion. The location had transitioned from a frontier fur post to the planet's largest warehouse, and a 2,000-foot luxury tower represented the next leap in maximizing the value of the shoreline. Then, the global economy collapsed. The financing froze, the machinery stopped moving, and the developers simply walked away. For years, the 110-foot deep foundation sat empty. Finally, in 2023, the crater was quietly filled in with dirt to make way for a much less ambitious residential building. The Spire hole stands as a physical monument to Chicago's biography. It reflects a city that has spent 2 centuries reinventing this specific patch of dirt, driven to build something bigger than the last generation, right at the edge of the water.